before I came, I had all these thoughts, and Teresa and Barbara and all these guys got to see me on Skype trying to pre-plan what was going to happen. And then maybe we should do this, and we should do that, and we should do this. I just wish that I would do what I always know, which is, once I get here, I'll know. Right? And so the most interesting thing that happened, and I can feel my emotions, you guys can hear them, and it's one of the things about me, if I allow myself to be real, if I trust myself, if I just get on stage and be me, this moves through me, and I just felt it move through me. And so one thing I want to say, where's Vicki? Vicki, I don't know if she's here, but do you remember when she came on stage and she felt emotional? In that moment, did you feel more connected to her or less? More deeply connected, right? And it's in that moment that I hope for myself and I hope for all of you that I can just say, wow, I was really touched by that. So if I feel emotional, which I did just now, and she said, welcome to New Zealand, and my parents stood up, that greatly moved me for many reasons. One is that I don't know how long on this planet I have with them, and I get to share this with them. So thank you. The second is that tears. Tears are a really important part of standing in our power and confidence as women. Tears matter because they mean so much more than tears, right? Tears can be tears of joy, yes? I'm feeling a big mix of tears. I feel emotional to be here. I feel tears of joy that my parents are here getting to experience this with all of you. I feel tears of relief that it's finally my turn so I can, this is going to happen, and then I'm going to get to sit with you all again, right? So tears don't always mean what you think they mean, right? You have to ask, wow, I noticed that you feel touched by what just happened. What does that mean? Right? Don't assume that you know what tears mean. And the other piece is that emotions actually drive decisions. Some of the most important decisions we make in our lives as leaders, as women, who we marry, who we partner with, what house we buy. Some of the most important decisions in our lives are made by emotion. We like to say, well, it costs this much, and I think maybe this, and he's really a nice person from a nice family, or she's pretty amazing. The truth is, our heart is the one that speaks much louder than that data that we like to justify those decisions by. So if we don't get really comfortable with emotions, we're never going to lead in the way that we could. So what I want to make sure you experience in me being up here is the authenticity of true emotion that comes through you, right, and through me, as I get to have an amazing discussion with Teresa. So welcome, Teresa, up too. I don't know how I just introduced Teresa. I don't know how that just happened, but thank you. Can I say one more thing?
Of course.
I just want to say, when Denise Arnold came up here, I was so touched by the questions you all asked her, because her answers were so real. It's like, can you have it all, Denise? And she said, yeah, I can, and my car is sometimes messy. Right? It's like the truth. The truth is that place that resonates inside of us. When you know that moment, you'll feel it. Your own physiology will tell you, oh, that's true. Listen to that piece. I think that's probably the most important thing you can listen for. So, thank you.
Well, Neha, it's wonderful to have you with us. And what the audience doesn't know, except for a few of my co-collaborators, is that Neha and her wonderful parents, Karma and Indu, arrived the day of the big wet.
It's true.
So, Neha, you've been here with your parents now a week.
Yep.
And much of the time in Auckland, but also a trip to Queenstown and parts further south. And I just wanted to start really by asking you, how do you feel about New Zealand? And just give us how you've experienced it for the week you've been here.
Well, I would say that this is an a spirited culture. I find New Zealand Kiwis to be open, generous, loving, and helpful. So it's been so amazing to have every person we encounter be so generous and loving towards us. I do find myself sometimes apologizing that I'm from the United States, which I need to stop doing. It's not only stunning, physically beautiful, but really that inner beauty and connectedness of welcoming. So that's how I felt.
When I heard you speak in San Francisco, I was moved by how open you were and how clear you were about how your experiences in your own childhood had shaped your life, both in the big ways and the small ways. Would you like to share some of those with us?
Sure. So I don't know these questions that are coming, so it's going to just take me a minute to formulate. When I'm in corporate America, oftentimes I'll come in, a leader will have me come in and say, we have really strong people, our culture is amazing, and there's this way that people are a little bit passive-aggressive with each other. They don't actually say what they mean. The meeting happens outside the meeting. Do you know what I'm talking about? Right? It's this politeness. Could you please come in and teach them honest, authentic communication so we can actually have those meetings inside the meeting? So I'll be working with them, and after a few times of working with them, someone will inevitably raise their hand and say, Dr. Sangwan, why are you asking me about my childhood? How does my childhood have anything to do with the boardroom? And I say to them, it's a great question. And the truth is, your childhood has as much to do with how you behave in the boardroom as your wardrobe had on what you're wearing today. So when we run away from our childhood or the pain that is there, the joys that were there, when we run away from that or we don't want to look at it or we don't want to understand the patterns, the truth is we're missing out on an enormous, enormous amount of information that can really help guide us and help us change. So I would say something, a quick example would be, my mom's in the house, so I'll tell this one. I was little, and I grew up for the first few years in Africa with my grandparents, and I came back, and I happened to be about 4 shades darker than the rest of my family. I don't think that was Africa, by the way. That wasn't relevant. But I love to be out in the sun, and I'm just generally a little bit darker. And so in the Indian culture, this is hard to say out loud, but it's true, we discriminate against our own based on the shades of brown that you are. The caste system, whether you're from the north or the south. Do you guys know what I'm talking about? Well, when I was little, my grandmother would say to me, I loved being out in the sun all the time, and she would say, Neha, get back in the house, otherwise you're going to be kala, and no one's going to marry you. And what that means is you're going to get too dark, and no one's going to marry you. So this little 6-year-old girl, I would run back in the house, and I would try to wash my skin, because I want to get married, right? But I didn't understand what she was talking about, right? And she didn't do it in a malicious way or a mean way. She loves me. And so there is some part of her culture that informs her that I have a better chance of getting a better mate if I'm a little bit lighter. Make sense? All right? And so at a very young age, I found myself uncomfortable in my own skin, right? Not believing that I was lovable. And so is it important for me to understand that I'm the only one in my family with curly hair? So my older sister, as siblings do, right, she likes to make fun of me. So she would point to the picture on the wall of all of us in the family, and she'd say, you're adopted. We know you're adopted, and let me tell you why. You're darker than any of us. And by the way, that curly hair you got going on that Mom says is so cool, fuzzball, you're the only one with curly hair, adopted. So she would give me her data, right, and I started to believe it. So the last thing I'll say is, in first grade, I went to school and they asked us to draw a self-portrait of ourselves. So I drew my self-portrait, and my mother came to school, as the parents do, to look around and see their kids and what the artwork is we've been creating. And my mom circled the whole classroom. She came back to me and she said, Neha, did you not do the assignment? I can't find you on the wall. And I was so irritated at my mother's own inability not to recognize me that I walked over to the wall and pointed to the girl with fair skin and straight hair and said, Mom, I just got out of the shower, right? And so to understand these stories and these experiences and how they had me not liking my curly hair for a very long time in my life and actually not liking parts of me, rejecting parts of me. Can you relate to not liking a certain part of you and almost self-rejecting yourself in your speech to your sisterhood, right? Or to someone in your life? How painful is that? Incredibly painful. So,
Neha, you've spoken publicly, and Lindy touched on this in the introduction, about being a good Indian child. Tell us about how that led you to be really a massive overachiever.
Yeah. So that is such a loaded question, Mom and Dad. How you doing? So when I was young, I very much believe that we were born in the world, and as babies, we actually depend on pleasing the people around us for our survival, to be fed, to get our diaper changed in time. I mean, the amount of time I have a dirty diaper is how effective I am in letting people know that I've got a dirty diaper, right? So I become dependent on the rest of the world and knowing when they smile, when they come. Then I grow up and I start to also, other people are in charge of me. Helping me go to school and clothing me and all of these things. So I become very good at pleasing the people outside of me and getting their approval. When you get into your teenage years, it starts to become your peers are more important than your family in that regard, right? What they care. You'll even, lie or, I should speak for myself. I would even lie or, break a curfew or a rule or whatever it is to make my friends think I was cool. And then we get married or go in a partnership, and then it becomes pleasing the partner. And it wasn't until my 30s that I actually had the meltdown of burnout and other things to say, oh my God, who am I? Like, what do I want? The self-reflection piece. And I'm totally off topic, so tell me what your question was.
It was really getting us to sharing with us how you ended up being an engineer and a doctor.
Oh, that's right. Oh, so Dad, one time I actually overheard you speaking to one of your friends. I don't think my dad knows this. And you said, all I ever wanted was a son, and somehow I ended up with 3 daughters. And I was like, oh, no way, right? Because you were way up there on my wanting to please you list, right? And so, short of a sex change, which I couldn't do, I was willing to do whatever it took to be that son for him. He said, well, if I had a son, he'd be an engineer and he'd play tennis with me and all these things. Oh, I played tennis. I was on the tennis team. I became a mechanical and biomedical engineer, as if one engineer isn't enough, right? My mother felt like she missed her calling to be a surgeon. As soon as I figured out that engineering and medicine were not mutually exclusive, I thought, hey, this is an easy answer. I'm doing both. So I became an engineer, and I worked for Motorola when Motorola was a thing. And I used to find myself in this cubicle, able to do the issue, solve the problems, but waiting eagerly for my next meeting where I would get human contact. I'd get into that meeting, and here we are. And I would realize it was all about black and white data on to solve a problem. And I'd want this, the connection from the heart, but I was only getting this left brain connection. And so even though I had achieved that, it felt a little empty. So then I was like, oh yeah, that medicine thing, that'll give me the heart piece. So I moved into medicine and went to med school where my mom was a researcher, and my mom actually ended up taking classes with me while I was there. So she got a little part of that as well. But yeah, I was going to please them no matter what it took.
During your residency, you actually had a trip to Australia, and you went to a retreat at a rainforest in Australia,
Yeah.
and that's the first place I think you said, or I read that you said,
Yeah.
I learnt to ask the question, what if I listen to my heart, is it telling me?
Yeah, this was in the Gold Coast. I remember this. This was 2000. I was just graduating. I was 30 years old, hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt. And I felt a little bit down, actually. I thought that I should be at the pinnacle of my education and just embarking on being a doctor, and I didn't feel that way. So I went to this, it was called Camp Eden on the Gold Coast. And as I was sitting there, me and 27 Aussies, the lead facilitator handed me a piece of rose quartz and said, Neha, why don't you start, since you're our guest here, and answer the question, if you could speak from the heart, what would you say? And I thought, sure, no problem. First of all, I didn't know you could speak from the heart. My whole life had been speaking from the head. So it didn't seem very threatening to me. So I took the rose quartz, and there's something really important. If you can't feel, if you find yourself more in your head than in your body or your heart, get just the right weight of a stone or a cushion in your hand, because there's something about that all of a sudden when you can feel in your body, you begin to feel. And that's what I experienced. And I said, if I could speak from the heart, I would say, I think I've lived my life for everyone but me. And it was that moment that had me jumping out of my seat, looking around to make sure that nobody else heard me. I was halfway around the world, and the person that needed to hear me just heard me. So what I do right now is, obviously I think it touches me deeply because my parents are sitting here. It's easier when I'm halfway around the world and they're not here.
You chose to bring them.
I didn't choose that question. And you're absolutely right. Personal accountability would tell me. I absolutely told. You know, it's really amazing in my life now, in the book as well. I wrote a book, and Lindsay, talk recipe was what you said, right? Which actually, that would be kind of amazing because it'd be like a cookbook for communication. I wrote Talk RX, right? So it's prescription, because I'm a doctor. And I think in my book, I kind of put it all out there in the world. And now every one of these experiences is a little more alignment of me. Like, now my parents are in the audience. As I've said this around the world, I've said this on TED Talks, my parents weren't in the audience. So there's just like a little more alignment that starts happening. And if I allow myself to experience it, I move right through it. Do you guys feel how I feel different now? Yeah. So I used to resist that, and it used to get bigger and bigger inside me. Now I don't resist it. I let it move through me, and I trust that I can handle me while you handle the discomfort that it might feel to experience someone feeling vulnerable on the stage. Make sense? Yeah. All right, so thank you for that, by the way.
So Neha, at this point, you're at some indeterminate age in your 30s, that wonderful age, mid-30s, some point in the mid-30s.
Yes.
And you've done your 2 engineering degrees, and
Yep.
you've done your medical qualifications in the US,
Yep.
and you've joined a partner practice,
Yep.
and you've made it to the top of that practice, and you are working every minute, you are taking on extra shifts, you are doing it all,
Yep.
and suddenly it all becomes too much.
Yep.
Tell us about that. Tell us about the stress, the burnout, the stress leave. It must have felt like failure to you, given all that you'd thought life was about. So tell us about that.
Yeah. So I was a hospitalist. I don't know if you guys have hospitalists here, but there's the general practitioners that are in the office, in the clinic, who's your primary doctor. And then there's, in the States, there's a doctor who only takes care of hospitalized patients, so the ones that are really sick enough to be in the hospital. So I became a hospitalist. And so we would take on like 16 to 18 hospitalized patients a day. And I was that people pleaser who, whenever someone couldn't do their shift or got sick, instead of asking for more staffing, which would be another way to do this, I would say, I'll take the overnight shift, so everyone would think I was what? Superwoman, team player, I'm amazing, see me, I'm the one volunteering. Even if my body was screaming of exhaustion, even if I couldn't, sleep one more sleepless night, I kept taking those shifts. Of course, this was all unconscious. I didn't realize any of this until I started reflecting on my past. But one day I walked up to a nurse and I said to her, could you please give the patient in 636 40 milliequivalents of potassium? And she looked at me and she said, Dr. Sangwan, are you okay? And I said, why? And she said, that's the 4th time you've asked me that same question. And I had no idea. To be that far gone and not be aware of myself, first of all, I shouldn't be taking care of anybody. I needed to take care of myself. But when I went in the bathroom, I looked in the mirror and I saw my very pale face. And I called a colleague of mine and I said, I need help. And he said, great, I'll see you tonight at 5 o'clock. As soon as I'm off, I'll fit you in. And it was about 11 in the morning. I said, how about now? And it was the first time that I had made myself important, that I had advocated for how about now, over inconveniencing someone else and saying, okay, 5 o'clock tonight is great. I said, how about now? I went over there, and as I spoke to him, he helped start to shed some light on the fact that I wasn't going back to the hospital. And what did I say to him? Who's going to take care of those other 16 patients? And he said, trust me, Neha, someone's going to take care of them, and it's not going to be you. You need to go home and take care of yourself. And so what I realized in that experience was, if I don't, some people think taking care of yourself is selfish. I actually think if I don't take care of myself, I become a burden on others. I was out of work for 3 to 4 months on medical leave. How much pressure did that put on my colleagues? Right? And so if I was aware and I could manage myself, I don't call it selfish, by the way, I call it self-full. Fill your own tank so you can support others, right? We're not actually supporting others if I'm actually drowning as I'm trying to help you, right? And so that was one of the biggest lessons I learned in burnout. And when I was off, those 3 to 4 months were some of the hardest months of my life because my arms and legs worked, and I kept ruminating over what will everybody think of me? I wonder what they're saying about me. I'm the one causing all the problems. They probably think I'm a failure. Until I realized, no, those were all my thoughts. Some people felt that way, actually, because some people kind of gave me condescending comments or said, like, how could you have done that? Like, you shouldn't have taken those shifts. Like, come on, Neha, get it together. The only comments of other people that stuck to me were the ones I believed. Take a moment to think about what I just said. When somebody else makes a judgment of you, the only ones that sting and really hurt are the ones that have an ounce of belief in you. You believe that they might be true. And I spent those few months with amazing, amazing coaches and really learning to reflect on me, strengthen my confidence, my belief in myself, and learn not to believe those judgments, those ideas that I had made about everybody else that were actually mine.
Is there anything else you can share with us about how you recovered, Neha?
How did I recover? So I'd say I'm probably still recovering. I'd say every day I learn to listen to my own voice slightly louder than I can hear the voices of others. And I really believe for us as women to reach our true potential, we have to first know that taking care of ourselves is not selfish. It's in fact self-full. And I'd say that I was so externally focused. I cared what you thought of success, and I cared what you thought of me, and I was going to turn myself into a pretzel to make sure you liked me. What an exhausting dance. And I think now, sometimes the people who know me and have known me for decades don't like that I'm changing. But I've learned that either I'm gonna, if I like me, If I like the woman looking back at me in the mirror, it's okay if other people don't like me, actually. And I think that's been one of the hardest lessons to learn. And sometimes people don't like me for a short period of time, and then they come back and they say, oh, that just kind of triggered something in me, but like I see how it's true for you. Sometimes they don't come back. And so I think in burnout, one of the other things I learned was I didn't move in the same circle as much anymore with the people who wanted to be victims and the people who wanted to say that the institution, the organization we worked for was bad and we were good. I had to kind of shed myself of some of my peers that were bringing that energy around me.
When you came back from that stress leave, you
Yeah.
went back to your job.
I did.
But you soon discovered that this didn't work anymore. Tell us about that.
It's true. Like I was just saying, things change. When you change, the world around you changes. So if you're going to leave this conference with all these great ideas and you're going to go home on fire and think that the whole world that's been out there was also at this conference, they weren't. And in fact, they might even say things to you like, you can't do that. How are you going to make any money at that? That's not a viable idea. They may start to say these things that if you have an ounce of belief in them will be true for you and you'll get upset with those people. Does that make sense? Don't be upset with them. Thank them because they're reminding you of your old you. Oh, I remember when I thought that too. Like, that's true. Like, I remember when that, like, thank you for that reminder. But I would say that when I went back to work, I started something called self-care and healthcare. I wanted to help heal the healers in medicine. I wasn't healed enough myself, actually, to do that. First, I had to change me and align myself with my passion and purpose. And the way I did that was actually one day leaving my partnership. And I have to tell you, the most interesting thing about the day I left was I went in to tell my boss, like, this doesn't fit for me anymore. And I'll tell you a little bit more on that. When I would go and see patients, I'd help them through a heart attack or I do not know why I'm spitting. I'm literally spitting, you guys. This is amazing. I have nothing else to say about that. I would go in and see patients. I would help them through a heart attack or stroke or pneumonia. Their family would send me chocolates and cards and flowers. Like I was Superman. They were like reinforcing that Superman idea that we talked about a minute ago, Superwoman idea. And I would feel really good about myself, except 2 years later, I watched the same patients come through with another heart attack and another stroke. And I thought, and they would say, continuity of care, Dr. Sangwan, could you please see patient so-and-so in bed 9? And I started to realize, oh my goodness, I'm numbing them through a crisis. I'm not getting to the root of what's making them sick. So I started reading in the literature. I started studying mind-body medicine. I started doing what I do best, which is go back to school, right? And I got certified in mind-body medicine, and I learned that stress causes or exacerbates more than 90 to 95% of all illness. So I started asking my patients, what's at the root of all of that stress, right? Let's get to the root of why you keep coming in here, not me just numbing you through the crisis.
Neha, your book is over there, and so I'm just doing a little pitch for your book and all the other books that Carol, who I mistakenly called Dorothy from The Wizard of Oz yesterday, Carol Bow has brought along for all of us to pursue and buy. And in your book, Talk RX, you talk about the awareness prescription. What is the awareness prescription?
So the awareness prescription is, you know how I said to you, I realized that stress was actually what was causing people to get physically ill? So let me make this connection, which is when you feel high levels of stress and you experience high levels of stress, have you ever noticed that you're literally awake at night? You literally can't sleep at night. Have you ever noticed that you get headaches? You start to have physical symptoms, your stomach turning, you're going to the bathroom, right? If your emotions and your stress are not managed on the level that they're happening, they show up in your physical body because that gets your attention. Then you show up in my office and ask me for something to numb that headache out with. One thing we know is your headache is not an Advil or ibuprofen deficiency. I can give you that pill, but it's not actually why you had a headache. Yes? It can get you through the day. But we have to ask other questions. So I started to ask the night before. I always believe, take care of the physical ailment first. If you're having chest discomfort, please go get it checked out on a physical level first. Then, once I stabilized my patients in the hospital, I began asking them the night before they were discharged. I would ask them, it was such a pleasure to treat you. I would like to see you again, just not in this environment. So how willing are you to answer some questions in order for us to make sure you're not here again, that we don't meet here again? They'd all say, oh, I'm willing, tell me what to do. So I used to have, this is why TalkRx got called TalkRx, because those days, it was 2006, 8, I would pull out my prescription pad, because it was the only paper I had in my lab coat, and I would write down these 5 questions for them. Question number 1, why this? Why a heart attack? Why not your left leg? Why not another area, your liver? Why is your heart breaking down in your body in this moment? What message is your body trying to give you? The second question was, why now? Why not 3 weeks from now or 2 years ago? In this very moment, why was it critical for you to be stopped in your tracks? The third question was, I love when I write the questions and I'm like, the third question was, hindsight's 20/20. So what signals might you have missed along the way that you can see clearly now, right? The fourth question is, what else in your life needs to be healed? And the fifth question was, if you spoke from the heart, what would you say? And that always brings me back to that Gold Coast, Australia moment. And what I'd say is, I stopped counting after about more than 2,700 of my patients told me exactly why they were ill. Every single one of them answered the question. They got 15 extra minutes with me the next day if they journaled about these questions so that we could talk and I could help them with resources. But that's when I realized they taught me that miscommunication, missed expectations, long-term stress, sadness, depression, anxiety in their lives was what was at the root of this stress. And now I dedicate my life to helping that.
I wish you'd been here with us 6 months ago when my left leg did go bung and I ended up in hospital.
Well, the good news is, Teresa, I'm going to give you the awareness prescription and we can still do it. Because you can still learn. Even if it happened 6 months ago, you can still learn from that experience. Channel that 6 months ago self and ask her those questions. Because she still knows. She knows.
So just one last question, because
Sure.
I'm getting the signal
Time.
from Lindy. Yeah.
Okay.
What next for you? The life you've crafted now is quite different from the life you were describing before. So
Yeah.
What next?
Well, this is amazing. You know, as I'm listening to, I was having conversations last night with my tribe, right, with the beautiful maroon triangle on us. And I was asking this question. I was reflecting on it, and I thought, wow, I'm at a real transition point in my life where I've done this work for corporations, I've done it for healthcare institutions, and I've always done service work for the public. As a doctor, I had such a hard time making my business model the public. And I think as I'm here, the timing of this couldn't be more perfect. I've just moved to Boston. And I would say, actually, this is a side note on the personal note, I'm actually ready for love and relationship, so it's going to happen. My whole life isn't going to be about work. So acknowledging that I said I wanted that, but I never created the time for it, that's one thing that's on my list. In a professional capacity, I've started to work with education systems. I think now I want to work with systems rather than individuals. Right? How can we impact an entire group of people? Whether it's the public or whether it's a company, that's where I'm headed next. But the most important thing is, the real answer is, I don't know. I don't actually know after the book and the public television show. That was what everything built up to. there's a lot of open space, and I'm not sure. All I knew was the next step, which was I'm coming to New Zealand. And after that, there's another step. I don't know, but what I know is it will unfold. So
Neha is now going to share with you some very practical work. But I'd just like to say thank you so much for coming. Thank you so much for bringing your wonderful parents, Indu and Karma. And a round of applause for the wonderful Dr. Neha.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.